Good afternoon. For today's 2-Minute Tuesday, I wanted to talk a little bit about red flags in contracts. Of course, contracts can get very complicated, and I usually recommend to people that they have an attorney review anything before they sign it. However, I understand that that's not always possible, and so today I'd like to discuss again some of those red flags that I look for when I'm reviewing a contract. The first one that I look for, and this may be the most important, is something that's required of my client that's not required of the other side. This comes up very frequently in settlement agreements in which, for example, my client agrees to pay money or agrees to accept money, and there's what they call a non-disclosure agreement, which prohibits my client from saying anything about the settlement. Well, if my client can't talk about the settlement, I want to make sure that the other side also can't talk about the settlement. If my client has to pay legal fees to enforce the settlement, if it comes to that, I want to make sure that the other side also has to pay legal fees to enforce the settlement. The second thing that I look for in a contract is lack of specificity. This is very important and frequently comes up in construction contracts. It's very important that my clients, who are generally the contractors, have very specific details as to the work they're to perform. What type of materials are to be used, how big the project is going to be, how much labor is anticipated, things like that. Because I have found that otherwise, my clients agree to perhaps build a shed in a backyard, and before they know it, they're responsible for building the Taj Mahal for the exact same cost. The third thing that I look for is if the other side has too much power. And this frequently comes up in leases. One of the most common terms in a commercial lease deals with subtenants. And generally, almost every lease that I've reviewed for the first time says something in it along the lines of the landlord shall have absolute discretion to reject any proposed subtenant. Well, that always makes me a little concerned because there's nothing that we can do if the landlord refuses a subtenant. Generally, I like to put in there something that says that the acceptance will not be unreasonably withheld. At least under those circumstances, we have something where we can threaten to go to court, or if absolutely necessary, go to court, arguing that the landlord has unreasonably withheld its acceptance of the subtenant that my client is proposing. I'm David Camino. If you have any questions about a contract, please feel free to call me.